Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we'll sit down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing 5 centimeters per second, Children Who Chase Lost Voices, Your Name, Weathering With You, and finally, newly released Suzume, all directed by Makoto Shinkai. It's going to be a great show, folks, so stay tuned and enjoy. Mr. Vincent Daly, how we doing, buddy?
Hey, how's it going, Tommy boy?
It's going okay with me. How was your week of movies, man?
A week was anime-filled, was overly emotional. I wasn't feeling the emotion, but it was trying to make me feel the emotion.
So we're going to... This is probably weird to see for some people.
Fair.
I think you teased it last week, but basically we have kind of a mini special here.
Yeah,
of course, we have a newly released though. But basically, you took this director who just came out with a new release called Suzume.
Yep.
Came out in late 2022 in Japan, but got released about a month ago here.
Bingo.
In the States. Makoto Shinkai. He's a big name, he's a big deal, but also his specific anime that comes out, it's also a reason why he wanted to bundle this all together. It's not very obscure. He's kind of a big deal. So what was kind of your thought process for just approaching this week?
Sure. So, Makoto Shinkai is both a writer and director. So right off the bat, I want to cover these writer-directors as, this is fully his own realized vision for his projects. And with some of the biggest hits in the last 10 years of Japanese films, live action or otherwise, I know Makoto Shinkai is a serious juggernaut here.
Out of the 5 films we're covering, 3 of them are in the top 15 all time.
Wow.
In Japan.
Wow.
3 of them.
Damn.
One of them is Suzume, by the way.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
The guy is he's a big, and that's why I started off with saying this isn't niche, weird anime. I mean, maybe
this is probably the most mainstream anime you can watch.
Right.
Honestly.
So it's if you want to dip your toe into anime, this is a great week and a great amount of movies to approach it.
Absolutely.
There's other big ones in Japan, of course. Mm-hmm. Spirited Away is huge.
Sure.
And that's now the number 2 film in Japan.
Wow. It got knocked down?
It got knocked down by, I'll have to find the name of the other one, but it came out in 2020.
Okay.
Something that kind of sounds more off-brand to us, at least.
Okay.
But basically, this guy, it's a heavy hitter, and his content isn't over the top where it's not going to be palatable for a lot of people.
Bingo, yeah. I mean, I'll probably say it a good amount of times in this episode, this week's fixation in terms that I'll have, but a gateway drug anime, basically. These movies are not your average anime, and by that, it means they lack a lot of the anime-ness that people come from expecting from the genre or the medium. Well, would you guess that anime is a little weird sometimes?
Yes, I don't know what you would consider me. It's almost like I don't speak anime, but I understand it.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? So I've dipped my toe in a little bit more than
the average
person, but I'm definitely, I look on from afar. Yeah. So I like some of the more tame stuff.
You had some hot takes around Piccolo and some wild comparisons. You threw it out a couple of times.
That's true, I did. But when it comes to anime, if I'm going to get into the really niche stuff or like the crazy stuff that people are like, you got to see this is crazy, or going on really crazy theming, it needs to be very niche and something that I'm into specific.
Right. Yeah.
You can eat a lot of it. You can handle a lot of anime. It's just up your alley. This is kind of cool, and I like this. I hope people don't shy away from it too much, because if you ever wanted to be interested into it, see some style, see a director who's huge. I mean, one of the top probably 3 or 4 guys in the past 30 years.
Yep.
of anime films, this is a good place to start.
Absolutely. You know, these are oftentimes romantic dramas with just very light, sprinkled, fantastical elements. I mean, I really call this overly pretty anime aimed for a family demographic. Also, a point brought up in some of the discussion in my own life around, covering Shinkai's work this week is that none of it's connected to any shows. There's no homework you need to do. These are all standalone feature films, which again adds to that gatewayness to it.
Definitely.
So much like a Studio Ghibli might be, I thought it was important to cover someone so prolific in the industry, good to cover for a gateway drug anime without it being too weird. And overall, I mean, these are all family films at heart, too. So as far as this, this is an acceptable demographic for, really any of our listeners at home.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So just my first question here, because we're starting with his 2007 film. Did he have a first one? Was it The Place Promised in Our Early Days?
Yes, he has. He's worked on projects.
Yes.
Pretty much any anime director is going to come up making their bones in working on other projects.
And shorts. But this was his project, correct?
I believe so.
Directed, produced, and written. Why is this one off the list?
I don't know. There's also another one that I cut as far as in the progression of his works, Garden of Words. Just something that, I don't know, I was trying to get a sampling of his styles. Really, every 3 years he releases one of these big releases. We see that starting with 5 centimeters per second in 2007. Then.
Okay. Well, let's jump right into it. Like you said, it's 2007. This is 5 centimeters per second. It's only an hour and 3 minutes. Definitely our shortest one that he covers. Original title.
Are we going to get one for all these?
We'll see. We'll see if I can handle
yes.
it. Biosuku 5 centimeters. No, I'm sorry. Wait a second. My screen was shaking from this floppy table that we're on. Okay. A Biosuku 5 centimetoro.
Centimetoro.
Which kind of makes sense. 5 centimeters per second.
That sounds
it's not nothing too crazy. Yeah. Okay, so like I said, it's only an hour and 3 minutes. Let's get into it a little bit, and how'd you like it?
Yeah, pretty much all of these I've seen. The only one that I haven't seen is our second one that we'll cover in just a second. 5 centimeters is coming off of a trend in the late 2000s of very mushy, very romantic anime. And like I said, all these are romances, but this one in particular is trying to maybe capture some of the trends at the time. It's a coming-of-age love story separated into chapters of 2 teens' lives, Takaki and Akiri. And in just a little over an hour, we watch 3 periods of their lives pass by for our chapters and seeing how they grow apart from a romance from when they were young. It's very much kind of like different stages and the struggles of a romance from a distance, long distance relationship, basically.
And we're just taking large jumps in their lives.
Exactly.
Okay.
And seeing how maybe that strains them a little bit, the longing they have. And, I mean, it's straightforward romance, basically.
Okay.
So this is an important early work for Makoto Shinkai, and honestly, a perfect example of his trademarks starting right away as a filmmaker. There are so many gorgeous still shots that hang on the mundane of life, but have a calm beauty to them. I mean, if there is one thing you can say about Shinkai's work is that it is drop dead gorgeous. Every single one of these films.
He just has an eye for.
Oh yeah. It looks amazing. There is a wonderful pseudo lens flare to lights that you can see all over these movies. It's special here because no studio was incorporating these film-like qualities, these mock film qualities into anime at the time. Even coming out in 2007, the anime drips in gorgeous scenery, and the look of everything can match the quality of Shinkai's work today, even. And that's where I was kind of, even for my own curiosity, testing like, hey, how does the old stuff line up for his, huge budgets that he has now and the huge team he coordinates
I
with?
actually wanted to bring that up in the beginning. It's going to be fun through these 5 films that you're going to take us on and just kind of let us know, like, what are his through lines?
Yeah.
What makes him, what's in his DNA of the films, kind of.
Absolutely.
And is he going for a hyper-realistic style and visuals, or it's still very clearly cartoon and everything like that? He's just prettying them up.
I think it is trying to go for a lot of realism.
Okay.
And you see this in his settings. It's always going to be real, present day Japan.
Okay.
Like I will say many times, I think that is a secret ingredient to why these films are so big, because it captures much more of probably a general audience overseas, in the West.
Yeah.
There is an appreciation in a family demographic that anyone can really get behind these movies because they aren't weird and they go after a realism in their imagery. So, you put this next to juggernauts like Your Name and you will see an identical visual style, only changed by production budget. Also, jump forward to the 2010s and many studios start experimenting with styles like this. Styles like simulating a real camera or having these lens flares pop up, being used by prestige anime studios, both in, for feature films, the many anime series that come about. But Shinkai was there and is still a trendsetter.
Wow.
In this
Okay,
way.
cool.
So, 2007, it's only an hour long. Could this have been replaced in the watch list? Sure. This is the first movie that I got exposed to his work, and it was amazing to see how much it really does resemble the same qualities he has to today, and that make him so successful.
Yeah, very cool.
So, I think where this film maybe feels a bit amateur is in writing, however. There is a heavy narration that plays over scenes, and it's a bit annoying. It genuinely sounds like children writing pen pal letters back to each other.
Oh, okay, sure.
Maybe some slight credit for realism, but also pretty annoying because the pen pal letters aren't great.
Okay,
it's very moody at times.
I'm surprised at that. I mean, his background comes from writing, and in animation too. But he's written a lot, and continues to write. It'll be fun to see if he improves on that, or that it's not a problem anymore in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. A big reason why I want to cover these films. So, it just feels very melodramatic in a way that anime can only be, especially from 2007. Yeah. It's kind of a youthful love that feels innocent, but it's very simple, and it's just not a lot of depth here just yet. He progresses into that depth, especially, watching these films, almost not trying to see it as an anime fan and just looking at it like a normal movie amongst every other movie.
Yeah.
And I see his writing progress, but our main character, Takaki, is just extremely moody. And like I said, in a way that only anime characters can be moody. He says this line about rockets reaching into the darkness, and I was like, come on. Like, it's too much. I think it's important as an observation, though, because we see his strengths sway when he's covering a boy-dominant story versus a girl-dominant story. There's almost a flip-flop that happens. And with all of these being romances in some way, it was interesting to see how each film balanced this. But this one is an easy one to start with, though. Honestly, it surprisingly holds up well. I would say give it a watch if you want a quick way to see his visual style, but maybe hold off for his later work if you want to see something more better for his writing and a little less stereotypical when it comes to anime characters. We're going to go ahead and give 5 centimeters per second a 68.
Okay, 68, pretty good score.
Yeah.
And that's a great point to say, too, it is an hour. It's an hour and 3 minutes. So if you just want to kind of give it a taste, see what the deal is, that's really good.
See why I described this as, drop dead gorgeous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's on display with all of these.
And flat out, like we said, he's, out of the 5 films we're covering, he has 3 films top best grossing in Japan of all time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like he's a big deal if you want to kind of... He's a
juggernaut, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Vin, and he is all over these films. Like he's not just writing and doing a little bit of animation. I mean, he's everywhere when it comes to cinematography and storyboard and that, and some casting and everything like that. He's so involved.
That's great.
It's pretty cool. And he sticks with it, and we're now in 2011. This next one is Children Who Chase Lost Voices. Original title.
Oh, boy.
Oshi Oyu Kodomo.
Wow. Oh, my God. I'm in Japan. That's actually pretty good, though.
Practice before you came over.
Yeah, he's just in the mirror.
How bad the first one went.
In tears running down. Like, I don't know how to make it say this.
Once again, we're kind of in... well, you said in the beginning, these are all kind of bit of relationship, romance / other things going on.
They are always, the core backbone is a love story, is a romance.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. Definitely feature length now. It's an hour and 56 minutes.
Yep.
So he's getting some more recognition and more money in the budget as well.
Yep.
How did this one play out?
Yeah, I would say this one was included just because it's probably the most fantasy that we get. For folks at home that maybe know some of this anime space, this was on the chopping block between 2013's Garden of Words for the slot. I just feel like that movie is just very slow. It's also a little weird in its romance, so kind of conflicting with my whole idea of like gateway drug anime.
Tasteful.
Right. So I went with this instead, and I felt it was good to cover because it has these more fantasy elements than most of Shinkai's movies, and that's something that we'll see come around for the new release Suzume. I will say, however, this was the only film I hadn't seen before, and by the end, those fantasy elements is what I kind of took issue with. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't. In this story, we follow a very independent little girl named Asuna as she stumbles in a journey to the magical realm of Agartha. The land is filled with mystical creatures and magic, which has a implied promise of making wishes come true. Anything from a grasp for power, a desire to find out what's going on with this mythical land, or even like reviving a loved one. Where wishes come true. It's real sunshine and daisies. She embarks on an adventure after stumbling into a mysterious love interest from this land and travels deeper into Agartha, dragged along by the desires of others. I would say there are some nice themes of struggling with death and more of kind of a Buddhist sensibility to the story's outlook on life. I found it very interesting where the film had depth. Unfortunately, none of that depth came from our main character. Our main character really feels like fished along for the entire thing. You know? There's almost no reason by the third act for her to be participating in anything, no less, where this story goes. That motivation for Asuna as our main character is really just impossibly weak. There is such weak motivation for her to dive deeper and deeper into increasingly dangerous lands. It really took me out of it. And this is where I was saying, I was happy to watch these because I kind of was excited to watch these without a lens of anime and judge them as a story and judge them.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
For characters and motive. You know what I mean? So I thought that was important and not something that I feel like I've been able to do just because anime is so out there. We've covered like the Dragon Ball movie, and it's just like, all right, well.
It's almost like Dragon Ball's pretty Americanized too.
Sure.
But with anime and a lot of the stuff that you covered or that's on the site and coming on the site, there's a lot in that back list kind of that we're trying to get on the site and everything.
Oh, for sure.
It's almost a different type of rating. Because they're just different movies, it's a different thing.
Right.
It's a whole different genre where you almost want to put on a different kind of judging hat, a different kind of
consideration for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But at least my goal this week was to not put on a different hat because they are just
for sure.
They're straightforward stories.
Yeah, and I very much like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you could say the same thing for some Studio Ghibli as well.
Yeah.
And not only that, they're so well known now, too.
Right there, yeah. I feel like if there's anything that shows in Suzume being just as successful as the last two he's done, he's up there with the greats now by money alone. You can't argue with it. So, the magical creature design honestly looks great. It is a very out there mythical beast, but not again intimidating. They're it's just the right amount of kind of wonder to them. There is a kind of a godlike aspect to these creatures, and it really makes them feel unique. And again, ties into these themes of struggling with death and some more. Maybe out there Buddhist type of theming, and I say out there for obviously the majority of our listening audience, but this is an earlier work, so maybe that was playing more towards strictly a Japanese audience. A lot of detail goes into explaining the world and life cycles, and that's really where I enjoyed the film the most. The fantasy, unfortunately, does not translate to stakes very well, and it feels just very disconnected from our main characters. Like I said, aspects like creatures and magic just kind of exist in the world without being blended into why our character cares. A perfect example is when Asuna comes across these fantasy creatures, she just acts like normal. There's no explanation, but there's also no wonderment in the character either. And I feel like, wow.
Makes it a little bit boring almost.
Yeah.
Like if the characters don't care, how can you care?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would absolutely call this a little boring.
Okay.
So, this is the only one that I haven't seen before. It was probably a good reason.
Yeah.
In ways, I would say it almost feels like a 90s family film in that way that things are thrown out there. It's just kind of accepted right away, and you're just along for the ride.
Yeah.
But it feels disconnected. Disconnected was my main note that I kept on returning to with this one. I can see how this is trying to copy a Studio Ghibli style. Honestly, I think it falls short. Much like 1997's Princess Mononoke, our characters are exposed to a world much larger than themselves. There's a lot of mythology in the world just to be dumped out, and at times this fantasy feels less adventurous and more about just like lore dumping. Sometimes that relates to cool, semi-religious themes a little bit, about death and life. Other times it's just like, oh boy, you can tell a Japanese guy wrote this because it's way too detail focused. It's like we don't need that,
Yeah, and maybe he's putting too much time into trying to build the world up, make it look cool.
Yeah.
And then the characters get forgotten a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Did the length hurt it at all?
Yeah, I mean, certainly added to the watching the clock type of boring of it. So
Sure.
And I want to use this opportunity to highlight I would say, a semi-valid criticism of Shinkai's work, that he could be seen as chasing Ghibli in style, in trend, big emotion and characters, overly pretty animation, globby tears when they cry. These are all things that he chases as trends, but this is probably the best example of when that's at its worst and purely kind of a copycat. So
okay, because even like you said, how he's a trendsetter as well. The way he likes the cinematography, he likes more flashy, a little bit maybe more saturation, more color, more realism.
Sure.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel like we're getting almost copycat vibes? Not just speaking on this film,
sure,
but in general as a director.
I think maybe there's an understanding he knows what a big anime feature film needs, and not unfortunately, but the template, the footprint that he fills is Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki.
Now the thing with Studio Ghibli, okay, so is it just the fact of they were first?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's very valid.
Big story, big characters, emotions, and then type of animation style.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of maybe that's just how that is now.
I think there's a perfect reason that Disney, John Lasseter, they partner with Studio Ghibli in the early days of licensing to this West, because they were a Disney-like company. They weren't attaching these movies as family, as fun as they are, to anime series. You didn't have to do any homework leading up. They were just dynamite IPs on their own.
Yeah, independent. Yeah, independent stories.
And I feel like in that way, not in a bad way at all, but Makoto is putting out these dynamite IPs on his own. He's writing it all. It's his babies.
It gets confusing with me. Definitely,
sure.
when it comes to Japanese anime and kind of series that continue. So you'll have major motion picture releases, but they're tied to a character that also has three other things, kind of, and it's just it can be a lot to try to get into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which makes the single films good, and it's also good that it just so happens that they're very good as well.
Yeah. I feel you. Yeah, and that's why we would cover something like the Dragon Ball movie when we did last year, because those sometimes are the biggest releases to compete with these, unique IPs.
And Dragon Ball, it was, the West is very friendly towards Dragon Ball.
Exactly. Overall, not a bad film. Very, very pretty visually, but weaker in writing and weaker in the follow-through of the concept. My main takeaway is that I'm happy to see Shinkai's style shake these comparisons as we move through future works, with him being a dominant voice in other films to get compared to him instead. I think this is just kind of a weird transitional work. Not exactly bad, but nothing that I'm really shouting about. We're going to go ahead and give The Children Who Chase Lost Voices a 52.
Okay, 52.
Yeah.
Yeah, just very much, I hate to say it, but blah territory.
It is blah territory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say even as wild as the thing gets, if the wild visuals aren't hitting and feeling impactful for characters, I judge it just the same way that bad CGI was implemented with an actor that doesn't know what the hell they're looking at.
Right. Oh, yeah,
So,
definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so we're going to jump ahead. Well, first of all, okay, so the number one film in Japan, by the way. Demon Slayer the movie, Mugen Train.
Yeah,
or Mugen Train.
Yeah. An all right movie. I'm not a huge fan of Demon Slayer, but that's a big series right now.
It's by far the best-selling Japanese film of all time.
Very visually pretty as well. That was actually around when the podcast was around.
It's 2020.
Yeah.
So a little bit, it was a year before we really kicked things off.
Yeah.
Again, though, Demon Slayer the movie, Mugen Train, that just tells me I'm doing homework. I've got to do homework.
Yeah.
I can't
Demon
just
Slayer's
step into this.
A big anime.
See,
too.
it's for me
confusing.
I want to hop in a movie, getting that one IP, like you said, that one singular story, then get out.
Yep.
And that's what's nice about Makoto.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna jump on, and this is the 5th best film of all time in Japan.
Wow, only 5th.
Yeah,
I mean, this one, I just feel like the legacy or the legend of Your Name is really up there. But
we'll go through them real quick. So we have Demon Slayer number 1, number 2 we have Spirited Away, which also makes sense. Then we have us coming in there with Titanic,
in Japan, you mean?
In Japan, Frozen.
No way.
Frozen on number 4.
Wow.
But then we have our next film here, came out in 2016. This is called Your Name. And this skyrocketed it now, this director. And Makoto Shinkai, he won a lot of awards, a lot of recognition for this one.
Yep.
It's when he's a very, very serious player. A lot of articles on him around this time. And also him saying, okay, is this the next guy? Is he creating the next Studio Ghibli kind of work and everything like that?
Yep.
So again, it's Your Name in 2016. How do we like it, Vin?
This is going to be a case where maybe I have to kind of temper expectations because there is just such almost rabid love for this film online.
Right, okay.
The film has almost infinite amounts of hype around it as one of the biggest anime feature films released, period. Internationally, this has picked up over 17 award wins, and like you said, Tom, skyrocketed in popularity really 3 times over. We have the Japanese audience release, then there was kind of a surge for critics reviewing it, and then finally when Western audiences got a hold of this then.
So is it because it took off in Japan that's when critics almost reevaluated it?
Yeah, and because Makoto was a good player at the time, he wasn't this legend just yet. So there was almost I don't know, when this was released, it felt like there was stages that it kind of hit new ignition to becoming, a bigger and bigger deal.
And reading up on it, definitely seemed like it shot through the culture in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Like even outside the movie a little bit. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, like most of these films, I've seen this before. Believe me, I don't want to kill the hype, but this has a very simple teen plot romance that is honestly a bit underwhelming for some watchers, myself included. And I've talked to other people that have seen this film, and it kind of boils down to a simple plot structure, but it's a solid recommendation because Shinkai's animation has reached an entirely new benchmark. I mean, this thing is, again, drop dead gorgeous.
Just beautiful, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, eye candy beyond eye candy.
So, and again, more hyper-realism? Is this like jumping from PS2 to PS3? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I don't know what stage or console, but yeah, no, there is. You can tell that his style, the DNA is there.
Yeah,
you can tell he's got money behind this
and he's not trying to almost make a cartoon.
Yeah,
he wants to use cartoon and making it seem making it look
a
really good.
A Tokyo story, a Japan story.
Okay.
There's a captured realism that yes, it's an anime, but I don't know. You can see it in the shots. He focuses on a boiling pot of soup, or the pastels of a coastal Japanese town. This is not like mechs fighting, giant robots fight, or demons. There's the anime-ness is toned down, but in that he still achieves a great work of anime. Your Name is a teen romance with basically the setup is Freaky Friday to the setup. Not to overly reduce it, but that's really what it is. Romance Freaky Friday that a boy is swapping bodies with a girl and vice versa. It's got an interesting spin being an anime romance, and that swap there is with a city boy named Taki and a country girl named Mitsuha. This body swap is caused by a comet flying over, bringing a literal meaning to star-crossed lovers. And it's a great example of this kind of gateway drug aspect, because there is, I don't know, this Freaky Friday plot of them, switching consciousness in their body. Yeah, Am I not about it? Yeah. Do I see it as kind of generic and played out? Sure.
A little simple, yeah.
But maybe that is what you need as a new viewer of anime. And I think in the numbers, it shows that this was able to capture a much wider demographic because of these reasons.
It's a great point.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
And was training wheels on
right,
it.
and if you're going through animation, and if you're going through this different type of style,
Yep.
it's shown through this Tokyo story rather than a Freaky Friday.
Yeah,
It's definitely, it helps.
yeah. It's great as well pacing-wise because we're introduced to this right away. The characters realize this right away. It's great because we have a good momentum to the story. They're swapping bodies daily. This results in a very cute system of them leaving notes for each other on how they're running and improving each other's lives. And I would say it makes for a very successful meet cute and instantly lovable characters. There's a fun playfulness to it. And again, these are all family, teen safe. So again, I think that's an important element.
Yeah,
here.
as far as the states go, they rated them as TV PG, a lot of these.
Oh, yeah.
Oddly enough, they didn't really get that classic movie MPAA.
Yep.
Except for our next two.
Okay.
But safe.
Yeah,
very safe.
absolutely. So, this movie really pushes Shinkai's budget and animation quality to the stratosphere. To call this movie beautiful would be honestly an understatement. There are near countless drop-dead gorgeous shots that capture just a surprisingly real-life look to Japanese life. Shinkai's style is more gorgeous than ever, but the new secret ingredient is introduced for the success of these films, and I think it's a love of both realistic city and rural Japanese locations. I think this aesthetic is showing everyday life, and it's in his DNA of Shinkai's style. I think it just hits a critical point here for his audience. Japanese audiences loving the authenticity, and Western anime fans being whisked away in an almost vacation-like enjoyment. There's a justice that he does to the Japanese locales that I think, again, it's a secret ingredient that's added to his already style that, if there's a reason why did this one go critical mass, that's it right there.
I think that makes sense. And kind of how I made that comment, how it kind of swept through culture a little bit.
Yeah.
Reading a few things, but one of them was like tours were set up then. Parts of countryside and parts of city, basically, because this is kind of splitting that.
Interesting.
And going back and forth, yeah.
I mean, to the point that I think that is a serious undertone of why Suzume was made. It feels like there's almost like a tourist plug to it. So, but there's a lot of traditionalism and culture that is paired naturally with these real settings, and I think it's what pushed family audiences as well to watch this film. I feel like there's I don't have a respect for the what they're going through as far as their local their local customs, but I feel like it captures a moment for that demographic. We see this factor clocked up again and again in his following two films, and I feel this realism is why the works and his later films skyrocketed even further in popularity. And it's all right here. This is where the template now is set for Shinkai. A little bit more about the structure of the film. The big trend at the time was putting a anime intro with music in front of every anime feature. This was a heavy use of music sequences all over this. There's probably like 3 really major music sequences in this. And I bring it up here because sometimes the film does feel more like a music video than a movie. And folks, if you know me, Tom, you know me. That's a pet peeve with me.
Yeah. It's a recipe for not success.
yeah, that's no good. And again, like I always say, it's not about the music itself, it's about implementation of it. So these scenes have such a drastic switch in pacing and editing that it's almost a bit distracting for the film. Now, I normally don't care if someone watches anime in Japanese or English, even though a classic debate in anime is subs versus dubs.
Sure, absolutely.
I could give 2 damns. If you're enjoying, if you get to experience it, it's fine, whatever you watch it. I would say this is the only one this week, though, that I would probably recommend a Japanese, because the lyrics, when they're translated, because of how heavy the music is.
Oh, okay.
And then how, Japanese lyrics work being kind of nonsense a lot of the times when you translate them. There's just something that just doesn't work for this English dub.
Okay.
And I think it's connected to that.
All right, so maybe go ahead and read the subtitles on this one.
Yeah. Exactly. But I can't stress, I normally don't care about that stuff.
We always usually, well, I won't speak for you, but how I am usually in the boat of enjoying real language and looking at subtitles.
Sure.
When you do, I mean, sometimes you have to be in a mood to
Yeah.
just do a subtitle film. You definitely have to be in a mood sometimes.
Yeah.
However, eventually they just kind of melt off the screen and you get used to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think I'm a strong believer of that when it comes to watching anything internationally, whether it's, dubbed or subtitled,
right.
It's what you experience first. That's what's going to sound natural to you. That's what you connect with.
Well, that's true too. I mean, I'm just thinking back to All Quiet because we both watched it and kind of watched it for that review. And you had watched, I believe, the English dubbed.
Yep.
An actual English, British dub.
And then kind of circled back.
Right. And then I just went straight for the
German.
Yeah, for the German subtitles right away.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think a lot of those arguments just boil down to
different strokes for different folks.
Exactly.
Yep.
What you came across at first, because the alternate is always going to sound awkward or weird. So
yeah.
But when I boil it down here, there's such an emphasis on this music in how the film moves, how the film conjures emotion. That if you watch it in English, you're just you're just going to be focused on the weird translation of the songs that they sound fine, but those lyrics, there's
It's a Japanese film. And we're not in Japan.
Yeah, exactly. So, folks, this is a very, very emotional movie, though. If you are looking for those globby anime tears, getting choked up, this is the one for you. In addition to this being a perfect gateway anime, I think it counts double for any female audiences. I feel like this one has so much more of emotional turn as the drama to the romance specifically that I feel like
Chick flicky?
Yeah, definitely chick flicky.
Yeah.
And obviously all of these kind of fall into that.
It's amazing how often anime does.
Yeah.
It's the one thing about anime that really makes me laugh sometimes. It's just like, wow, a lot of this is very girly.
Yeah. And this is I would say the peak of that.
For him.
Yes.
Okay.
For him, but also I mean, it's a big ass movie. And it's not that I had a problem with the emotion of the film. I would say again, it just boils down to the setup for everything feels just so played out. Not that I'm even a fan of what Freaky Friday in the 70s, the Jamie Lee Curtis,
Lindsay Lohan.
the remake. It just feels like a story template that's just been played out by now, and that's where I kind of come, not lukewarm, but not certainly the heights of perfect scores that people give this movie. So
yeah, big time.
The romance here starts to feel familiar, becomes very fun, and then we'll choke you up right alongside with the characters on the screen. We're going to go ahead and give the legendary Your Name a 74.
Okay, 74 for Kimi no no wa. 74 is pretty good.
You might be showing up in the next film.
Yeah. Definitely a more tame score than what you would read online. The moment you look up this film,
Absolutely.
you're going to be looking at high 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, even things that are a little bit more harsher, more critical.
Sure.
Still, they're shooting this up pretty high.
Exactly.
So 74, I think that's very healthy. I think that's a great... You laid it out very well where we know what we're walking into now with this one.
I'm glad.
Because that's the one that's really going to punch. When you look up this guy, that movie's going to be hitting you the most.
Yep.
That and also our next one, this is 3 years later. This is 2019's Weathering With You. Now, this is PG-13. It's an hour and 52 minutes. Let's kind of get into it right away. How is he coming off of that huge title?
Yeah. How do you follow up one of Japan's most successful films? You kind of just do the same thing.
The posters look really similar too.
Oh, like almost identical.
Yeah, definitely. So
the arcing lens flare, the blues, the white text. It's
it looks like he does skies beautifully.
Absolutely. Yeah, if there's actually, that's a great observation. If there's
I'm seeing a lot of skies.
Yeah, his skies are stunning.
Yeah,
and that again is where like he takes these otherwise filler shots and makes them something so breathtaking.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Weathering With You, Tenki Noko.
Oh, that's it.
What you got?
He's got it. I feel this film, when this came out, that Shinkai's style and trends became a bit stale for me personally. I did watch these films on release. Though the story-wise, nearly everything is different, it's the feel, the emotion, and the movement of the story that becomes a template at this point. As my close friend and anime aficionado Dave always says, these movies are all about building up to that one point where the music swells and characters burst into tears. And you can almost line up the timeline of both of these movies, and they're exactly at the same points. Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So, again, not bad, but this film gets a lot of critical praise. I just kind of want to... That's where I'm coming from. That
it's piggybacking.
Yeah,
it is piggybacking off a massive success.
Absolutely.
As you would expect, kind of.
Oh, for sure. Right.
I mean, you want something different. You want him to just make the most unique, different things every time.
He walks in the boardroom of the Japanese producers, probably very stern Japanese men, and he's not going to say, I want to do something exciting here.
Right. You can't make it your name, too, so just what can you give us?
Exactly. So, in Weathering with You, our main character is Hadoka, a 16-year-old runaway boy who struggles to kind of make it in Tokyo as a homeless kid. It's a little intense in parts and definitely justifies a little bit more of that PG-13 rating. Not, but again, light. If anything, I appreciated that it was a little bit more dramatic in parts. Tokyo has been experiencing a endless rainfall, and the rumors of a mystical power to control the rain start circling the city. They are called Sunshine Girls, and we run across Mina, a fellow teen girl who is able to make the rain go away magically. Together, they make a cute little side business cleaning up the rain for people around the city and kind of find a new meaning to life with each other. And I mean, it's honestly, the charm of this one kind of got me. There was just such a fun playfulness to them making this lemonade stand style business, but actually solving a lot of people's problems with this rain. So I don't know. I feel like this had a playful structure to it that I felt was a lot more unique. This may not have as good as a romance that we saw in Your Name, but the supporting characters and the plot has a lot more depth to it that I would say takes it beyond just a teen romance, which, again, I actually really didn't even say that with Your Name, but it is that's kind of my takeaway. It's really good, but it's also just a teen romance.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I enjoyed the maturity of side characters getting some storylines of their own, and it helped break up some of that straightforward romance. It varies a little bit. For instance, Hadoka is taken in by a bachelor that turns out is just struggling for custody of his daughter, and it's the little things like that show development and progression in Shinkai's screenplays themselves. He's creating more dramatic little sprinkles in there, but able to weave them together. I feel like Weathering with You, where it may be weaker in areas than Your Name, it may be copycat to Your Name, I feel like it's really stronger in character work. You could just see that he's getting better at writing. It was really good to watch these almost back to back because you see the progression in that writing then.
Yeah, and I like how you watched them too. The order that you watched them is also, I think, the way to go.
Oh, absolutely. If you are going to kind of deep dive for the director. Flat out, some of the most gorgeous rain you will ever see animated. I feel like you hear about stories in Pixar and Disney, how they really bend over backwards to create realism to things that shouldn't matter, like Frozen. They brought in real snow into the studio to figure out how to animate it. I feel like a similar thing. They were just watching rain, or they had a rainy summer, and they're like, you know what? I can draw this pretty well. It takes place in Tokyo, and I mean, the pun intended, the whole city is bathed in this rainy atmosphere. It captures kind of an urban hustle, a head-downness to the city. It's very realistic in its depiction of Tokyo, but that comes with some odd parts to this film. On a positive, this captures some of that modern aspect to Japanese culture, intimidating corporate interviews, city life, crowded subways. There's, it kind of really doesn't really hold a punch. Not that it's trying to say something about it, but city life is kind of shitty in this. On a bad side, this realism of Tokyo, you could really feel the scale and the expectation for a bigger and badder movie for Shinkai. We get a very iffy McDonald's advertisement in here.
Very sensitive to these things.
Oh, yeah. An abundance of advertising on buildings. And I'm honestly... just speaking openly about it, I'm just a little split on it being part of or passable because of that realism of the city.
It's very Tokyo.
Right. but it's also a little product placement. I mean, there is a sausage McMuffin advert in the background, and it's just like, that's a little too much. Like, give me McDonald's, sure, but I don't need to know the product lineup.
I need to see this now. I need to come with another opinion. That's very funny.
Yeah, so I'm bringing it up, definitely a little torn on it.
Right, because Tokyo could be so, like, Times Square-y, basically.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, you see the Sony signs and, all the different companies having the branding on their building.
Right, exactly.
So I'll say I'm split. Yeah, I think another key factor here of these later movies, they're so successful in the West and in Japan, is the balance of mystical elements. And anime can be pretty weird sometimes, and the fantasy here is only lightly sprinkled in the story. Take this film's premise of a magical power to control the rain. The citizens of Tokyo take it as some lucky coincidence, even when they're doing this like lemonade stand idea. They're just like, oh, I guess it cleared up. Hey, here, kids, I guess I'll pay you, get out of my hair type of thing. When it ties into more of a magical element, I think it hits on a realism of kind of a Japanese Shinto mysticism that feels just as appropriate as a Disney character making a wish on a star. It's an acceptableness to it. It never are you getting kind of gut checked with like, wow, this is something really out there. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, this makes a great gateway anime for younger audiences and Western audiences that might be turned off by some of the out there stylings to it. So, full credit to Your Name and Weathering With You. Originally, when I saw this back in 2019, I was a lot more critical on it because I felt it was derivative of the director's own work. And again, something about the buildup of scenes feels like it is on rails towards that big emotional release. But watching this again, it has such quality to the production and just enough of a different story. Perhaps a bit weaker in romance, but the stronger characters in writing, it is paired with just the same degree of breathtaking visuals to back it all up. I really think this is a case where I want to score identically, because while it feels like a template for Shinkai, I can't in good faith call it lesser either. We're going to go ahead and give Weathering With You a 74.
Wow. That's, I think, might be a first for the podcast.
Back to back.
74.
Certainly.
That's very interesting, just because it's the same movie, but it's not. It's piggybacking, but it's not. It's not Your Name Number 2. It is a different film.
Right.
But that's fascinating, where he really just struck gold and he kept with it.
Yeah.
And he didn't make it worse.
Yeah.
But it wasn't better.
Right. I think, even with me saying that, like, yeah, it's just kind of done again.
Right.
There's enough to distinguish it. But I feel like coming out of the film, you feel exactly the same. And that's where kind of, and again, this almost if you lined it up in a graph, timeline to timeline, you could see the plot beats, almost calculated.
That's very funny. That's very funny.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Vin. All right. So before we move on to our last film here, or the ones in theater now, just don't forget, we are going off of the value for value model. So are you getting value from the newsletter, the podcast, the website? If you could, you go to the website, you go to thedailyratings.com, you go over to the donations tab, and through monetary support, you can kind of send in whatever you want, whatever amount of value you are getting from us. You go ahead and put a number to it, you send it our way, along with a note that you wrote, and we'll read it here on the podcast. Whether it's questions, comments, critiques, love, hate, doesn't matter. Did we make you laugh this week? Did we make you cry? Or did we fill you with some information you didn't know? So I remember last week Jared had wrote in and said that we're streamlining kind of his movie watching, and we're kind of doing that, but taking care of that for him, that little bit of homework, and he appreciated that. He sent us some money in. So that's kind of what we're doing. Again, it's a value for value model. It's the dailyratings.com. You go to the donations tab. And yeah, again, the newsletter's out now. Head to the bottom, sign up for that. I think this week, by the way, we were one of the first people to publish a story about the writer's strike.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm, yeah,
okay.
just because I saw that it was maybe coming down the pike, and then I was kind of like tossing and turning at the night. I said, I'm just going to do it. So I logged on, boom, got it out. We were one of the first in line to get that story out.
Breaking news. That's great.
Again, it's at dailyratings.com. Go ahead and check it out. All right, Vince, so we are on our last film here. We are on Suzume, otherwise known as Suzume no Tojimari.
Wow.
That was so bad. Suzume no Tojimari. Okay, so this is our longest one.
No, you are doing a great job with all of these.
If I slow down, I'm doing so much. I'm looking at this screen. I'm looking at this. I'm doing it. Doesn't falling over my words left and right. My mouth is falling down the stairs during the donation segment. So this is our longest one. It's 2 hours and 2 minutes. It's now rated PG, so definitely family friendly.
Yep.
I'm excited to kind of hear you. How does he tackle this? He's still huge. He's a huge name. I mean, this is 14th best film, still of all time in Japan. So the guy is like
he's still making money. He's making cash,
striking hot.
Yeah.
How is Suzume?
Suzume, I really loved.
Wow. Okay.
I thought it was great. To explain, I think. I watched this film about 2 weeks ago because I needed to get it before it went out of. We had that very new release heavy week.
Yeah.
I wanted to get it before it got knocked out of the many films in rotation. I watched it, and then I was able to watch a little bit of it online again, and just I wanted to get that done as a refresh coming into this after watching all the other ones.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make another note. Like, I know it's being critically reviewed and everything like that. I don't know. Do you agree, though, that it's kind of under the radar a little bit?
Yeah.
And I get we're not an anime culture too much, but when anime hits big, usually it is kind of talked about a little bit more over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it just boils down. It doesn't have that blue sky, white text poster. Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it's not Super Mario Brothers. That's the problem.
Very true. There's a different grasp on the families. So, folks, after lackluster anime film releases to cover on the podcast, I really had some high hopes on this one. I'm a huge advocate for getting people into anime, but that doesn't mean I'm going to hold punches. A perfect example of this was in 2021, Bell from a favorite director of mine, Mamoru Hosoda, a top-tier anime director, and exciting for me to highlight on the podcast, only for it to be generic CGI trash. I was, you can go back to that episode. I actually don't know what episode that was.
Early.
Yeah.
It was very early, and you were bummed out by it.
Yeah, I really was. Not only coming from Hosoda, but, finally, something to cover like this, maybe give some recommendations out, and just was not making the cut. Couldn't in good faith call that, even a slightly good film. So I was curious going into this film, and honestly, when I saw it 2 weeks ago, it was up in the air if we were going to even do this episode at all or not, because if it wasn't worth it, I'm not going to make this, this climb and then just be like, and it's bad. Go watch the old ones. So I'm happy to say it is worth it. And I'll come right out and say it. And it's definitely my favorite film from Shinkai yet.
Wow.
Both in the appreciation of his growing work, but I think on its own, like it just knocks it out of the park. Really fun movie. In Suzume, guess what? We follow a teen girl named Suzume. In a usual setup, she is naturally independent, very curious, and really a bit of a wanderer. One day, she stumbles upon a ruined building with a mysterious door inviting her closer and closer until she falls into a new land. This exposes her to the world of closers, individuals tasked with closing magical gates that pop up around Japan and are caused by kind of a growing force that they need to counteract. These gates may look like average doors, but lead to a magical realm called Ever After, and actually crop up in all sorts of Japanese ruins. Now, these ruins aren't just stone ruins or anything like that. One of the coolest aspects of the world building here is that these ruins can be anywhere that's abandoned that once had lively peoples. We have a abandoned school. We have an abandoned carnival. There are cool uses of, once again, Japanese locales. If anything,
this is what you were saying. This is a bit of a touristy.
Yeah, I think there is a brilliant business decision behind this one, possibly advertising run-down places in Japan that now will attract tourists. Talk about turning water into wine.
Yeah,
this is I mean, they really did a great job. And I think besides that business observation, I think it's really cool seeing the creative uses of what they consider a ruin. And there's a lot of enjoyment there. One of the most enjoyable aspects for me, for sure. We find our love interest Soda, who is a closer, one of these agents trying to close the gate, and discover its key to actually stopping earthquakes in Japan. This is also where I say this is probably one of the more magical of his films because it's kind of out there. You're dealing with a different dimension. You're dealing with some more magical elements. I think right in the rating of this being PG, it's still within the wheelhouse of, being very user, new.
Yeah, he's been he's very consistent with it.
Yeah. When it relates to these gates causing earthquakes, though, Makoto Shinkai has been praised in the past for his ability to capture real-life Japanese concerns and fears woven into these otherwise, straightforward romance films. Previously, we have had a dangerous comment, torrential rainfall, but earthquakes feel like the best example yet of this implementation. And with the structure of the story being more of a fantasy adventure, it gives some great rising tension to keep you interested, especially if the romance isn't doing it for you. And I feel like that's where this finally, he's juggling much more than a romance. We see Your Name, very good, kind of just straightforward romance, really nothing to vary it. We have more kind of interpersonal dramas in Weathering With You. Here we have all of that, and now a good electric premise that you want to watch. It's a good adventure you want to watch. You want to pay attention to it. So it engages with you.
Yeah, very cool. I like that. And it also sounds like you said, his writing keeps on getting better and better.
Yeah.
Because when we covered Children Who Lost with Lost Voices, he's trying to do both. He's trying to have this huge kind of cool story, but at the same time, his dialogue is failing that a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Once again, the film is undeniably gorgeous, especially with a lot more fantasy that it gives us for visual eye candy. I was really nervous coming into this for how CGI was interwoven, but all of it was good and really didn't distract me. There's a weird trend for animes to really dedicate CGI animation to cars for some reason.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's like cel-shaded, it kind of blends, but nothing bad here. And recently, modern anime, just to explain my nervousness coming into this, modern anime has had a lot of gross CGI thrown into it for production problems, for a streamlined production to help out the team's animation to take advantage of the workforce that is probably coming up as CGI animators versus pen and paper animators.
Yeah, that's annoying though.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, we hate CGI, so
yeah.
they're having the same problem as us.
Exactly. While we start in urban Japan, the plot soon puts our characters on the road and experiencing many regions of Japan. There is a fun road trip aspect to this, but almost feels like a travel advertisement at times, both in a good and a bad way. I really can't separate myself from the idea that, producers at Toho and Comics Wave were looking at the previous films and encouraging these aspects in Shinkai's production. I think it's good. I think it plays well with the idea. I just have there's a hint of something there. There's a smell in the air that's just like, this is helping tourist industry. Let's make a real all across Japan type of story. Obviously that's not going to affect people's watching experience so much, but it definitely was an observation for me, especially watching all these films.
Okay.
So, on the positive end of that, let me not be all doom and gloom. On the positive end of that, if that's a quality that you appreciate about these films, if that's an enjoyment, guess what? It's been clocking up as we see with these last three movies.
And I'd like that, because if it's just kind of, hey, we're taking an adventure through Japan a little bit and really kind of getting to know the country even through an animation lens, that's kind of cool. I mean, as part of that, that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And bottom line, as far as visuals go, as far as the story goes, he's doing a great job with it.
Yeah.
So even if at worst case scenario, the producers are twirling their mustache and watching the stocks of travel agencies go up, in worst case scenario, it's very appropriate for the story, and it's very well, it's executed upon well.
Okay.
So, as for the romance, it's surprisingly cute and charms you in an interesting way. There are two twists that happen, though, that I really don't want to give away. It was great because it was breaking up the usual boy-girl plot. plot of the romance. And again, like I said, we kind of juggle who is the primary character or main character, whether it is a boy or a girl. I feel like there's a little bit of a switch up here that goes a long way. And again, that's why I think like he's breaking away and he's showing progression in these type of films. Coming off the last film in particular, there's also a increased depth in supporting characters. Suzume has complex relationships with her parental guardian that's explored. There's also some very positive themes around friendship with other girls. I might not be the target demographic for this, but I can recognize a new and fresh tone when it comes to that. You know what I mean? As far as a family film, it was positive in a new way. It certainly wasn't positive as well in like a down your throat kind of, pushing out an agenda type of way either. So it was refreshing in a lot of ways there. The heightened fantasy elements helped the romance a lot too. I was getting vibes from it being a bit like 2004's Howl's Moving Castle, an all-time favorite of mine, on the must-watch on the site.
Yep.
This seriously is where the film having more Ghibli-like elements was a good thing, because I felt it was only slightly resembling in the story, and the primary factors were it's Shinkai's work. He's just kind of slowly reincorporating what we know and love from the industry. I will say the final third of the story is a bit lopsided. It slows down significantly, where up until that point, I mean, it was at breakneck speed.
You're moving at a good pace. I mean, it is cracking the 2-hour mark for an animation. It's a lot.
Yeah. And in those moments are where some of the go around Japan aspect is.
Yeah.
So it's not terrible, but it just has that lopsided element that I think prevented it from being a little greater, honestly. But I had a great time with this. A nice mix of romance, fantasy, and adventure, keeping you engaged. And most of all, a work that shows momentum in the lessons learned from previous films. I would say the emotional depth has come a long way from that melodramatic tone in early movies, You can practically hear like Linkin Park playing over some of those movies. It's so like, oh man, come on. But it gives me great joy to see Shinkai develop not only in his animating and not only in his directing, but his writing as well. The surprise for me as someone that's seasoned with these films is that the writing just kept on getting better and better and more in-depth, more impactful, more complex, more dramatic as well. And it gives me even greater joy to actually have an anime I want to recommend. We're going to go ahead and give Suzume an 80 on the dot.
Wow. That's such a good score.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it was Suzume that took it there.
You're right.
That's a great surprise.
Yeah.
80%, that's so good.
Yeah.
Boy, I mean, it looks like it's in 440 theaters.
Okay.
That's not a lot, but I think you might be able to get one kind of close to you, at least one hopefully within 45 minutes or something like that, if you wanted to go check this out in a big screen. And 80% is a great score.
Yeah.
It's cool that Makoto Shinkai is continuing to get better, and it's not like he's... I mean, we're in a 15-year stretch. I don't want to say he's in his Robert De Niro phase, where he's just like, give me the checks, kind of.
Right,
it doesn't need to be good, doesn't need to be anything... breathtaking or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at one source here that says that basically Your Name, Suzume, Weathering With You, they're in the top 10 as far as worldwide grossing.
Okay.
I don't think that's quite right, to be honest with you, but those three films are just huge Japanese films.
Yeah.
They're definitely in the top 15 Japanese grossing, at least, or Japan grossing. 80% for Suzume is so good.
Yeah. I feel like it was the perfect concoction of his style, what people liked from his style, family oriented. It was.
And if you wanted to jump right into this, you can jump into this film.
Yeah,
you don't need to do the homework.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'd absolutely encourage people to do.
Yeah. So. All right, Vin. That's great. I have one note here basically, and it's again I haven't watched a lot, but I've watched enough to kind of get a feel for really good Japanese work as far as movies are concerned and everything like that. And I can also see what the Japanese people think as well.
Sure.
The way they tell stories are their main big stories that they love and they cherish. Very rooted in the heart of the Japanese people, kind of. You look at something like Spirited Away, which is such a huge movie for the country. You look at some of these where they touch on things, like you said, where it was concerns of the Japanese people. You get a feel for what is actually life in Tokyo, things like that. They're very good at getting to the core of the people or people's concerns. There was the one Netflix show a couple years ago where it was such a huge show going worldwide, and it was just people came into this guy's tiny restaurant. Remember that Japanese show?
Yes, Midnight Diner.
Midnight Diner.
Oh,
and
what a great show.
I don't know, when you see enough Japanese work, you get this pick up on that vibe a little bit.
Yeah.
And I can't help but wondering, because it's so much in the news now, and it's going to be a growing concern and talked about like kind of the demographic collapse that they're kind of facing.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're going to start seeing more family positive animes coming.
Yeah.
You know?
I know what you mean.
Instead of just, hey, come see Japan, like, because advertisements are trying to show off the country in a certain way or something like that.
Yep.
Can we also see it now as far as like, hey,
this is a great place for families.
Great place for families. Have kids, things like that.
3 years, we'll get that in Makoto's next movie.
Yeah.
I think that's a phenomenal observation, though, because I think that is exactly in the same shade as the tourist positivity that it possibly is a business element to these films.
Right, that business element there, and also fear, like you're saying, the earthquake stuff. They're always kind of touching on that things, and I think the Studio Ghibli, and it's just something that gets to the heart of the Japanese people a little bit. A lot of these films just have serious heart to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a thought I was kind of thinking of as you were kind of talking through all these.
Yeah. And I don't know, maybe about family positivity. Apparently, Shinkai was interviewed and he says he doesn't want to do a romance for his next one, that he's had enough now of these romance films.
I can imagine. I mean, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I certainly would love to see him.
Spread your wings.
Yeah, go somewhere new with it. But certainly he has a grasp on and is able to interweave without it being out of place some sort of concern within, Japanese culture and modern Japanese culture too.
Yeah.
These are very in the present day type of films. So
yeah, definitely. Vin, thank you so much for watching these. Are there things that you want to kind of touch on or anything like that? Or we're going to roll credits here.
Maybe just a little bit of a heads up for the coming episodes, folks.
A heads up or a get excited? I think that's what you mean.
Yes, get excited. You can tell if that's my outlook. You can tell. It's written on the walls. We got, of course, the 3 Guardians movies, Guardians of the Galaxy and Volume 3 coming out next week. The next 2 weeks, though, we are dedicating to the behemoth Fast and Furious.
Hey-o.
We're going to be doing the first 5 Fast and Furious as kind of a series special. And then the latter 5, including, of course, Fast 10 as the new release in the following week. So get ready, start your engines, polish Vin Diesel's bald head, and it's going to be about family. That's all I got. I haven't watched him yet, so we'll have more puns.
Well, we got to get through some Chris Pratt before that. But Vin, thank you so much for watching these. Thanks for stopping by. Folks at home, we hope that you enjoyed this episode a little bit. And if you just want to write into us, let us know. I mean, did you enjoy this or have an open mind towards this?
Sure.
Or did you not hate? Did you not like it? I don't know.
You're not watching any anime.
Specifically, if you hated it, make sure you become a producer and send a little some. But Vin, thank you so much. Folks at home, we'll run it down one more time here. We have 5 centimeters per second with a 68%, Children Who Chase Lost Voices with a 52, Your Name with a 74, Weathering With You with a 74, and finally, Suzume with an 80%. Folks, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, could you give us a good rating or tell a friend about us? If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. You can donate whatever amount of value you feel you receive from us. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.